My name is Edward Barnes, I'm 68 years old, and I spent 4 decades building the house my wife Linda and I dreamed of. A white 2-story home on Maplewood Lane, with a porch swing I carved one winter and a cherry tree that bloomed every spring. After Linda passed in 2019, the house felt like a museum of her laughter. I once thought about selling it, but my daughter Emily stopped me. "Dad, this house is our history," she said, tears trembling in her eyes. "You'll always have a home here. I promise." Her words carried the warmth I needed. I trusted her, my only child. So, when I transferred the deed into her name, for inheritance purposes, I didn't hesitate. It felt right, responsible, almost comforting. I told myself I was simply securing our family's future, that this home would always belong to us, to Linda's memory. I had no idea that the promise she gave me would one day be the very thing that took my home away. Tell me where you're watching from, and hit like if you've ever trusted someone so completely, only to realize the promise cost you everything. The first changes were so small I almost ignored them. A new rug in the hallway, a fresh coat of pale gray paint on the living room walls, and Linda's lace curtains replaced with something modern, as Emily called it. I told myself she was just trying to help, trying to make the house livelier again. I didn't want to seem like the old man clinging to the past. But the piano was harder to overlook. Linda's piano. It stood in the corner of the living room for 40 years, scratched, slightly out of tune, but hers. One afternoon, I came home from the grocery store and found the space empty, a patch of lighter wood marking where it used to stand. "Where's the piano?" I asked, setting the bags down. Ryan looked up from his laptop. "We donated it, Ed. Nobody was playing it anymore. Figured someone else could get some use out of it." I remember the sound my chair made when I sat down, that quiet creak before everything inside me started to tighten. I wanted to speak, but I stopped myself. It was just an object, I told myself. Objects can't hold love. Still, that night, I dreamt I heard Linda playing softly from the other room, and when I woke up, I could still hear the echo of those notes that weren't really there. Over the next few months, more things disappeared: framed photos, old books, the embroidered blanket Linda made before Emily was born. Every time I asked, the answer was the same. "We're decluttering." Then came the laughter. One afternoon, I returned from my daily walk to find several cars parked outside the house. Through the front window, I saw people standing in the living room, strangers, dressed too neatly, holding tablets and papers. Their voices carried, bright and confident, like they owned the air inside those walls. I stepped in quietly. A man in a dark suit was laughing, pointing at something on a blueprint spread across my dining table. Ryan noticed me first. His smile was quick, nervous. "Hey, Ed," he said, standing. "We're just discussing a few remodeling ideas. You'll love what we're planning." The suited man extended his hand. "Mr. Barnes, pleasure. We're just reviewing the potential layout options. You've got quite the property here." Property. That word stung. My throat went dry. "Excuse me," I said, looking at Ryan. "Potential for what?" Ryan hesitated. "You know, just future options. Maybe adding value, maybe." "Adding value?" I interrupted. "This is our home, not a project." He nodded quickly, like a man caught between two lies. Of course. We're just exploring ideas. Nothing's decided." I stood there, watching those strangers mark notes across the table where Linda and I once had dinner every night. The house smelled different that day: fresh paint, synthetic polish, and something else beneath it: distance. After they left, I sat alone on the porch. The swing was gone, replaced by a new bench, safer, Emily said. The yard looked trimmed, lifeless. Even the cherry tree seemed quieter that evening, its branches still. Later that night, I heard Emily and Ryan talking in their room. Their voices were low but tense. I caught fragments: offer, mortgage, he doesn't need to know yet. I wanted to believe I misheard. But something inside me, that quiet intuition that comes with age, told me otherwise. A week later, my suspicion turned to truth. The mail came late that morning. Among the bills and flyers was a white envelope with the Everstone Realty logo. My name was printed neatly: Edward Barnes, tenant. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I opened it carefully, scanning the words: notice of property transfer, pending occupancy adjustment. Tenant. Adjustment. I felt the blood leave my face. I walked straight to Emily's room. She was at her desk, laptop open. "Emily," I said, holding the letter. "What is this?" She looked up, her face pale. "Dad, please don't be upset." "Don't be upset." My voice stayed calm, but my hands were trembling. "They're calling me a tenant in my own house." She swallowed hard. "We had to sell, Dad. The taxes, the repairs, Ryan losing his job, it was too much. You don't understand how hard this was." "Then you should have told me," I said quietly. She looked away. "I thought it would be temporary. We planned to buy it back once things got better." "Temporary?" I whispered. "You sold the house your mother and I built. You sold it while I was still living here." She reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "Dad, you can stay until the end of the month. The new owner understands. You won't be thrown out right away." I just stared at her. I didn't shout, didn't curse. Something deeper than anger settled in me, a cold, steady realization that my daughter, the same girl who once promised me forever, had turned my home into a transaction. That night, I sat in Linda's old chair and looked at the empty space where the piano had been. The house felt hollow, stripped of sound and warmth. I tried to imagine it filled with new furniture, strange voices, maybe that man in the suit laughing again in the kitchen. It was then I understood, the house wasn't ours anymore. Not because of a deed or a letter, but because of trust. Once trust leaves a home, no wall can hold it together. I didn't sleep that night. The house creaked with every gust of wind, and each sound felt like a reminder that it no longer belonged to me. Around 2 in the morning, I found myself walking through the darkened hallway, touching the walls as if my palms could still claim them. 40 years of memories lived in that wood and plaster: birthdays, Christmas mornings, Linda humming while folding laundry, Emily's laughter echoing up the stairs. Now, there was silence. The kind of silence that follows betrayal. By morning, I had convinced myself there must be some mistake, a misunderstanding, a legal mix-up. Emily couldn't have done this knowingly. She was my daughter. She'd promised me a home forever. When the sun rose, I made coffee and waited at the kitchen table for her to wake up. She came downstairs around 9, already dressed, a faint tension in her shoulders. "Morning, Dad," she said, not meeting my eyes. I placed the letter from Everstone Realty in front of her. "Explain." Her hand froze halfway to her mug. "Dad." "No," I interrupted quietly. "Explain it. Don't soften it, don't spare me. Just tell me what you did." She exhaled, long and trembling. "Ryan lost his job last year. The mortgage payments, the insurance, we were drowning. The house was worth too much to ignore, and you said yourself you didn't want any more debt. We just. You sold it," I finished for her. "Without telling me." Tears welled in her eyes. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We thought we could handle it, that it was just paperwork. The new owner agreed to let you stay here until we figured something out." "Stay here," I repeated, the words heavy in my mouth. "Like a guest." Her voice broke. "Dad, please. We needed stability. We needed respect," I said firmly. "That's what you needed. But you spent it. Ryan appeared in the doorway, his expression guarded. "We didn't have a choice, Ed," he said. "It was either sell or lose everything." I looked at him. "You lost something more valuable than money." He didn't reply. Emily stood there, crying quietly, but I couldn't comfort her. My heart was too still. I left the room and went upstairs, closing the door to what used to be Linda's sewing room. It smelled faintly of lavender and dust. I sat in her chair and let the truth settle in. The home I built was gone. Not through disaster or decay, but through signatures and silence. That afternoon, I packed 6 boxes. That's all it took to hold my life: photographs, a few shirts, Linda's old teacup, a stack of letters she'd written me over the years. I wrapped the cup carefully in newspaper, then stopped halfway through. I thought of the day Linda and I moved into this house in 1982. We were young, hopeful, broke. I'd carried her over the threshold, both of us laughing because I nearly tripped. We didn't have furniture, just a mattress and a coffee pot, but we had faith that time would fill the rooms. And it did. Time gave us everything, until our own child took it away. When I finished packing, I stepped outside. The porch swing was missing, of course. "We're replacing it," Ryan had said a few weeks earlier. Now I understood what that meant. They had been stripping away pieces of my life one by one, preparing for a sale long before the letter ever came. The cherry tree still stood, though. Its leaves rustled softly in the wind. I touched its bark before leaving, as if saying goodbye to an old friend. The next morning, I signed the lease for a 1-bedroom apartment off Harrison Road. $950 a month, far more than I could comfortably afford on my pension, but there was no other choice. The landlord, a polite young man named Keith, handed me the keys with a professional smile. "Welcome home," he said. I almost laughed. The apartment was small, with beige walls and a window that faced the parking lot. I placed Linda's photo on the windowsill and sat on the edge of the bed. The air smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals. I tried to tell myself it was temporary, that maybe Emily would come to her senses, that we'd fix this somehow. But days turned into weeks, and no call came. Instead, I received a text from Emily: "Dad, I hope you're settling in. Lily misses you. We'll visit soon." No apology. Just a soft avoidance, as if this new arrangement were normal. I spent my mornings walking to the park, feeding the pigeons, talking with a retired teacher named Howard who sat on the same bench every day. He told me, "You can tell a lot about people by what they do when they think you'll forgive them." I nodded. I already knew. Still, I couldn't let go of the house. Some nights, I'd drive by Maplewood Lane just to see it. The porch light was still the same warm hue, but everything else had changed: new curtains, a different car in the driveway, and one evening, I saw strangers through the window, laughing around my old dining table. It was a strange kind of grief, losing a place that still stood. Then, one morning, a small brown envelope changed everything. I found it while unpacking Linda's sewing cabinet, the same one I almost left behind. The envelope was brittle, sealed with yellowed tape. Inside was a certificate of deposit from 1993, in Linda's name, worth $48,000. I remembered her voice from years ago: "This is our emergency light, Ed. For when the dark gets too heavy." I never thought that darkness would come from our own daughter. I took it to the bank the next day. With accumulated interest, it was worth nearly $170,000. The teller congratulated me. I nodded, silent. That night, I sat by the window of my apartment and looked at the city lights, thinking about Linda. She had left me more than money, she had left me a way to stand again. The next week, I began making calls. Real estate agents. Lawyers. Quiet inquiries about Maplewood Lane. That's when I learned the truth that twisted the knife one final turn: the new owner was already flipping the house, renovating, repainting, preparing to sell it for over $600,000. My daughter hadn't saved her family, she'd enriched a stranger. I remember standing there, phone in hand, breathing slowly, feeling the kind of calm that comes when anger burns itself out. Emily had taken my home. But she hadn't taken my will. Linda used to say, dignity doesn't fade unless you trade it away. So, I decided I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't accuse. I would act. Quietly, patiently, the way truth always moves before it's seen. That was the day the idea of Linda's Haven was born, though I didn't yet know what shape it would take. All I knew was that I would not die in that apartment, surrounded by strangers' laughter echoing from the home I built with love. I would find a way to restore what was lost, not the house itself, but the meaning of home. It's strange how quickly a lifetime can fit into boxes. Cardboard, tape, and silence, that's all I had left when I began packing for real. The house on Maplewood Lane no longer smelled like home. The faint trace of Linda's perfume that once clung to the curtains was gone. The air felt cold, hollow. I started in the living room. The walls were bare now, stripped of the photographs that once told our story, Linda holding baby Emily by the porch steps, Emily in her cap and gown, Linda and I at our 30th anniversary dinner. The nails still stuck out of the wall, little silver wounds in the paint. Each photo I placed in the box felt like closing a door that would never open again. Ryan passed by occasionally, trying not to meet my eyes. "Need any help, Ed?" he asked once. "No," I said, without looking up. "I built this house with my own hands. I can pack it with them too." He didn't answer. Just stood there a moment before walking away, his footsteps echoing through the empty hallway. The kitchen was harder. Every plate, every spoon carried its own ghost. Linda's teapot, still faintly stained from years of morning coffee. The cutting board where she used to slice apples for Emily's lunch. I couldn't throw them away, but I couldn't take them all either. The apartment was small, space was a new kind of honesty. I remember opening the cabinet above the sink and finding a note, Emily's handwriting, from years ago. For Mom, who always finds a way to make everything right. The ink had faded, but the words cut deep. I folded it carefully and placed it inside a small wooden box. Some memories were too sharp to leave behind, even when they hurt. Outside, the cherry tree was shedding its leaves early that year. The ground was covered in soft red and gold, and the wind carried the faint sound of children playing down the street. I sat on the porch steps, the swing long gone, and let the afternoon sun warm my face. Neighbors waved as they passed, unaware this was goodbye. For 40 years, I had mowed this lawn, fixed broken fences, shoveled the snow from the sidewalk. I had been Mr. Barnes, the steady man at the corner house who always waved back. Now, I was leaving like a tenant whose lease had expired. Emily avoided me those last few days. I think guilt made her quiet. She left early for work, came home late, and when we did cross paths, she spoke softly, as though afraid to wake something fragile. "Dad," she said one night, standing in the doorway, "I hope you know this wasn't easy for us." I nodded. It was easier than honesty. She didn't respond. Just nodded once and left the room. The final morning arrived gray and windless. The moving van pulled up at 7. The driver, a young man with tattoos and kind eyes, asked, "Where we headed, sir?" "Harrison Road," I replied, my voice even. He nodded. "We'll take good care of your things." I watched him and his assistant carry out the boxes. Each one made the house emptier, until all that remained was the echo of footsteps and the smell of old wood. I walked through the rooms one last time. In the bedroom, I ran my hand across the wall where Linda's dresser had stood. In the hallway, I paused at the spot where Emily's height had been marked in pencil, tiny lines climbing up the wall, ending at age 16. I traced them with my finger. The pencil marks were still there, faint but visible. Proof that life had happened here once. When I reached the front door, I hesitated. I turned back and whispered, "Thank you." Not to the walls, but to the years. For all their noise and warmth and laughter. For Linda's voice that still seemed to hum through the air. Then I closed the door for the last time. The apartment was small, clean, and painfully quiet. A single window faced the parking lot of a grocery store. I set up my few belongings with care, Linda's photo on the table, her teacup beside it, the small box of letters on the nightstand. It wasn't home, but it was shelter. The first week passed slowly. I tried to fill the silence with routine, coffee at 7, a walk at 9, lunch at noon. I spoke to no one except the clerk at the store and an old woman named Janet who lived across the hall. She lent me a hammer once to hang a photo and told me about her cat, Oliver, who never came when called. At night, I could hear the hum of traffic, the occasional siren, the sound of rain on the window. That's when the loneliness settled deepest. There's a certain quiet that only comes after betrayal, not loud, not angry, just cold and absolute. I found myself thinking of Linda constantly. How she would have handled this. She had a calm strength I never mastered. She believed every wound could be mended with patience and truth. I wasn't sure she would forgive Emily, but she'd want me to find peace, not bitterness. One morning, I took out my old notebook, the one where I'd kept household budgets, garden plans, and quotes Linda used to like. I opened to a blank page and wrote in careful letters. I built that house with my own hands. I gave it to my daughter with trust. She sold it with fear. But the walls remember who loved them. It wasn't anger. It was acknowledgement. By the end of that month, I had adjusted to my new life, or at least learned to endure it. I paid the rent on time, cooked small meals, and sat by the window most evenings, watching the sun sink behind the grocery store's roof. Then, one night, while looking for a pair of scissors, I opened Linda's old sewing cabinet. It was the last thing I had unpacked, still half filled with her spools of thread and fabric scraps. Something was wedged beneath the bottom drawer, a brown envelope, worn and dusty. At first, I thought it was another old note. But when I opened it, my breath caught. Inside was a certificate of deposit dated 1993, signed in Linda's name. $48,000. I stared at it for a long time before remembering her words, spoken decades earlier while we were balancing the checkbook at the kitchen table. This is our emergency light, Ed. If life ever grows dark, this will help you find your way back. I ran my fingers over her handwriting, trembling. I hadn't realized how much I'd needed that light until that moment. The next morning, I went to the bank. With interest, the certificate had grown to nearly $170,000. The clerk smiled, congratulating me on my wise investment. But it wasn't wisdom. It was Linda. That night, for the first time since leaving Maplewood Lane, I slept without waking from dreams of empty rooms. I didn't know what I would do yet, but I knew this, I wasn't finished. Not with life, not with truth, and not with the meaning of home. The world had taken my house. But Linda had left me the means to rebuild something far stronger, dignity. For weeks, the brown envelope sat on my kitchen table, beside Linda's photo. I looked at it every morning, as if waiting for it to tell me what to do. It felt almost alive, that fragile paper carrying not just money, but purpose. I had lived quietly since the move. The apartment walls were thin, I could hear my neighbor's television through them at night. I didn't mind. Noise was a comfort now. It filled the spaces where memory tried to speak. Still, every day around sunset, I found myself standing by the window, looking toward the direction of Maplewood Lane. I couldn't see the house from there, but I knew the distance, 3 miles exactly. Close enough to haunt me, far enough to keep me away. Then one Tuesday morning, curiosity got the better of me. I drove there. The cherry tree had lost most of its leaves. A "for sale" sign leaned slightly forward in the yard, its corners flapping in the wind. The house looked different, too clean, too polished. New paint on the porch, fresh shutters, a trimmed hedge. It didn't breathe the way it used to. It looked like a product. A car pulled into the driveway, a silver sedan. A woman stepped out, talking on her phone, wearing a blazer and heels. A real estate agent. I stood across the street, hidden behind a row of mailboxes. I listened. She spoke loudly into her phone. Yes, the remodel's complete. Listed at $640,000. It'll move fast. Great neighborhood, solid resale value. $640,000. I remembered signing away that same property for less than half. The sound of her voice, casual, efficient, made my chest tighten. That was my life she was selling like a kitchen appliance. I left before she noticed me. Back home, I sat for hours at my small dining table, the envelope still there. Inside it, Linda's savings, the quiet fruit of her patience and love. I unfolded the certificate again, studying her signature. Strong, steady, confident. She had always believed in preparing for storms. I had been the one who thought they'd never come. That night, I called an old friend, Mark Reynolds, a retired lawyer I'd known since my teaching days. We hadn't spoken in years, not since Linda's funeral, but when he picked up, his voice carried that same calm authority it always had. "Ed," he said. "You're a hard man to find." I wasn't hiding, I told him. Just misplaced. He chuckled softly. "What's going on?" So I told him everything. I told him about the deed transfer, the sale, the letter, and the envelope. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he exhaled slowly. "You have the money," he said finally. "You have the moral right. Let's make sure you have the legal one too." Over the next few days, we met several times at his office, a small room above a bakery, with the faint smell of coffee and bread drifting through the walls. We talked about options. Technically, the house had been sold legally. But there were ways to move forward with dignity. "What do you want, Ed?" he asked one afternoon. I thought about it. "Not revenge. Just respect." He nodded. "Then we'll build something that lasts." That's how Linda's Haven LLC was born, a small company in name only, created for one purpose, to buy back the house on Maplewood Lane. It took 3 weeks of paperwork, quiet calls, and careful coordination. Mark handled the legal side. I handled the silence, pretending everything was normal when Emily called once or twice, always avoiding the subject of the house. The irony was that she never knew. When the sale went through, the listing agent never mentioned the buyer's identity. On paper, it was just another investment company purchasing a renovated home in a good neighborhood. The morning I signed the closing documents, the sky was pale gray, the kind of light Linda loved for photography. The pen felt heavy in my hand. When I finished, Mark looked at me and smiled. "Congratulations, Ed," he said. "You're the owner of 42, Maplewood Lane." Again. The words didn't hit me right away. They sank in slowly, like warmth spreading through cold hands. I nodded. "Not owner," I said. "Keeper." That evening, I drove to the house. The "for sale" sign was gone. The driveway was empty. I parked across the street and just watched for a while. The porch light flickered on as the sun went down, bathing the yard in soft yellow. I didn't go inside. Not yet. The key was in my pocket, but I wasn't ready to turn it. Ownership meant responsibility, not just for walls and windows, but for the memory inside them. I sat there until the streetlights came on. Then I whispered to the air, "We're home, Lynn." The next morning, I called the real estate office and arranged something small, an open house for potential buyers. It wasn't a sale, not really. It was a setting. A stage. I wanted to see who would walk through that door. On Saturday, the day of the open house, I dressed carefully. A dark jacket, clean shoes, my wedding ring polished. I arrived early, before anyone else. The air smelled like autumn, sharp, clear, honest. The agent greeted me at the door, smiling politely. "Mr. Barnes, we're expecting good traffic today. Lovely home you've got here." "Thank you," I said. "It's been through a lot." One by one, visitors arrived, couples, small families, curious neighbors. I greeted them quietly, watched their faces as they admired the kitchen, the new paint, the space. Then, around noon, a familiar car pulled up. Emily's. She stepped out with Ryan and their daughter, Lily. "My granddaughter." She ran ahead, her small voice ringing through the yard. "Mommy, look. It's Grandpa's house." Emily froze. She hadn't seen me yet. Ryan looked pale, checking his phone as if wishing himself invisible. When the agent smiled and said, "The seller will be arriving shortly," I stepped out from the hallway. Emily's eyes widened. "Dad?" I nodded. "Welcome home." For a moment, nobody spoke. Lily stood between us, holding a small stuffed rabbit. The air in the room seemed to pause. Emily finally whispered, "You bought it?" "I did," I said calmly. "For Linda. For what she built." Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't move toward her. This wasn't about comfort. It was about truth. "No shouting," I said quietly. "No anger. Just understanding." Ryan lowered his head. Emily's lip trembled. "We didn't mean." "I know," I interrupted softly. "But meaning isn't enough. Promises are actions, not words." She nodded, unable to speak. The silence that followed was long, but it wasn't cruel. It was the kind of silence that clears a wound before it can heal. When they left that afternoon, the house was quiet again. The sun spilled through the windows, touching the hardwood floors Linda once polished every Sunday. I stood in that light for a long time, breathing slowly. The world hadn't given me justice. But it had given me something better, peace earned, not granted. And as I locked the door behind me, I realized that the envelope on my table hadn't just carried money. It had carried direction. It had brought me home. After that day, I began living differently, slower, quieter, but not small. I had my house back, though no one really knew it was mine. To the neighborhood, 42, Maplewood Lane had simply changed hands again. Another buyer, another renovation, another quiet sale. That was fine with me. The house didn't need to be announced. It just needed to breathe again. I spent the first few days inside alone, walking through each room in silence. The smell of new paint still lingered, but beneath it, faintly, I could sense the old familiar scent, cedar, dust, and the faint sweetness of Linda's perfume. In the living room, sunlight fell across the floorboards where Linda's piano once stood. I could almost see her there, her fingers gliding over the keys, humming softly as she played. "You can always start over, Ed," she used to say. "Even in the same place." I whispered back, "I'm trying." I didn't change much about the house. The furniture that had come with the remodel stayed, not because I liked it, but because it was practical. I had no need for extravagance. What mattered was structure, stability. That's why the first thing I did after taking ownership was to meet again with Mark, my lawyer. In his office, I laid out what I wanted. "The house needs to be placed in a trust," I told him. "It's not mine to sell again. Not anyone's, really. It belongs to what built it, family, memory, and respect." He leaned back, nodding slowly. "You're talking about a family trust?" "Yes. Name it after Linda. Call it the Barnes Family Trust, or Linda's Haven, whatever fits. The point is, it stays in the family, but it never goes on the market again. Ever." Mark smiled faintly. "You're not just protecting a property. You're restoring a principle. Exactly. It took several weeks to finalize everything. Paperwork, signatures, notarizations, the quiet machinery of law doing what shouting and tears never could. I moved through each step calmly, deliberately, like a man rebuilding the rhythm of his life brick by brick. During that time, I didn't hear from Emily or Ryan. Perhaps they didn't know how to reach out. Or perhaps they were too ashamed. Either way, I didn't chase them. There's a kind of love that survives only at a distance. I think we'd reached that stage. But one Sunday morning in late February, I saw Emily again. It was raining softly. I had just come back from the store, groceries tucked under my arm, when a small car pulled up to the curb. Emily stepped out slowly, holding an umbrella. She looked thinner, older, tired. She didn't have Ryan with her, just Lily, who sat in the back seat coloring quietly. "Dad," she said, her voice uncertain. "Emily." I nodded, standing still in the rain. She hesitated, then looked toward the house. "I heard you bought it back." "I did. For Mom. For what's right." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She had her mother's restraint, that quiet dignity that shows up only after all the noise has died. "I wanted to see it," she said. I stepped aside. "Go on." She walked slowly up the porch steps, brushing her fingers against the rail. When she reached the front door, she stopped. "It looks the same," she whispered. "It's supposed to," I said. Inside, she moved through the rooms carefully, as though walking through a church. She paused by the window where Linda's plants once stood, then by the stairs where her childhood hike marks were still faintly visible. When she turned to me, her face was trembling. "I don't deserve to be here." I shook my head. "You don't have to deserve it. You just have to understand it." She took a deep breath. "We were desperate, Dad. Ryan thought it was the only way. I thought we could fix it later. I was wrong." "I know," I said softly. "Fear makes people sell things they should protect. You were afraid. I was trusting. Both of us paid for that." She wiped her eyes. "What happens now?" "Nothing dramatic," I replied. "The house is in a trust. It's no longer anyone's to sell. It will pass to Lily one day, but under one rule, it stays in the family. Always." She looked around, her expression unreadable. "You're keeping it?" "No. I'm keeping watch over it." That seemed to reach her. She nodded, eyes downcast. "Thank you," she said finally. "Don't thank me," I told her. "Just learn from it. A promise is worth more than a mortgage." We stood there for a while, the rain tapping softly against the windows. Then Lily came running in, holding a small drawing. "Grandpa," she said, her voice bright. "I drew your tree." She held up a picture, a crayon sketch of the cherry tree in full bloom, pink petals falling like snow. I knelt down to look at it. "That's beautiful," I said, smiling. "It's Mommy's favorite," she said proudly. I glanced at Emily, who nodded, eyes glistening. "It always was," she whispered. When they left that afternoon, I stood by the window watching their car disappear down the road. The rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, landing gently on the porch rail. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace, not the peace of winning, but of balance restored. That evening, I sat outside on the rebuilt porch swing, just like the one I'd carved decades ago. The wood creaked softly beneath me, and the air smelled of wet earth and new beginnings. The cherry tree shimmered under the fading light, small drops of rain clinging to its petals like tiny mirrors. I thought of Linda then. Of her patience, her quiet strength, her unwavering belief that time heals what people can't. She had been right. The world hadn't given me justice in the way people dream of it, no apologies shouted, no debts repaid. But it had given me clarity. Truth had come home, and it had done so silently, without needing permission. Now, I live in rhythm with that silence. I take care of the garden. I read in the evenings. Sometimes, Emily and Lily visit on Sundays, bringing coffee and pie. We sit together without words, the 3 generations under one roof again, though everything between us has changed. We don't talk about the sale or the betrayal. We don't need to. The truth has already spoken. When I look at them, my daughter and my granddaughter, I see not loss, but continuation. The story didn't end when the deed was signed away, nor when it was signed back. It simply turned a page. And as I sit on that porch, watching the sunset light up the cherry blossoms, I understand something I never did before: home isn't a place you own. It's the part of you that refuses to disappear, even when others try to sell it. That night, before going inside, I whispered toward the quiet yard, "We made it back, Lynn. One way or another, we found our way home." The branches of the cherry tree swayed gently in response, scattering a few petals onto the porch, soft as forgiveness. I've lived long enough to know that life rarely gives you perfect symmetry, no grand justice, no cinematic revenge. But sometimes, if you stay quiet long enough, truth returns on its own feet. That's what happened the day of the open house. It was a Saturday in early March. The cherry tree had just begun to bud again, small pink dots breaking through the cold bark. I'd spent the morning sweeping the porch, polishing the brass door handle, and making sure every window was open to the soft spring air. The house smelled alive again. The real estate agent arrived first, a woman named Claire. She thought it was just another showing. She didn't know that the house wasn't truly for sale anymore. I told her I was testing the market value for the new LLC. It wasn't a lie, not exactly. I wanted to see something that day, to see who would walk in, and how the truth would look standing in sunlight. By noon, cars began lining Maplewood Lane. Neighbors wandered over out of curiosity. Young couples in neat clothes came in holding brochures, murmuring about square footage and mortgage rates. I greeted them all with quiet politeness, offering coffee and cookies from the kitchen counter. And then, just before 1 o'clock, I saw a familiar silver SUV pull into the driveway. Emily stepped out first, followed by Ryan and little Lily. They were dressed nicely, the kind of polish that speaks of hope mixed with nervousness. Emily held a folder, maybe mortgage pre-approval documents, maybe just courage. I watched them through the window for a moment before opening the door. Claire greeted them warmly. "You must be the Barneses. Welcome. You're going to love this one. The seller will be arriving shortly." Ryan smiled stiffly. Emily's eyes moved over the porch, the door, the swing. Her gaze lingered on the cherry tree. I saw recognition flicker in her expression, and confusion. When she stepped inside, her footsteps faltered. The hallway smelled the same as it always had, lemon oil and cedar. The living room's layout was almost identical to how it used to be, except the piano was gone, and new curtains framed the windows. "Ryan," she whispered, "it's Dad's house." He looked around uneasily. "It just looks similar," he muttered. But even he didn't sound convinced. Claire led them through the kitchen, explaining the recent upgrades, the structural integrity, and the potential resale margins. Ryan nodded along, half listening. Emily trailed behind, silent, fingers brushing against the edge of the dining table. When Claire said, "The seller will join us in just a moment," I stepped into the doorway. Emily turned, and for a heartbeat, she stopped breathing. "Dad," she whispered. Lily ran forward, laughing. "Grandpa." She wrapped her arms around my legs. I bent down, stroked her hair gently, then looked at Emily. "Welcome home," I said quietly. No shouting followed. No chaos. Just stillness, the kind of stillness that forces truth to show its face. Ryan looked like he wanted to vanish. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Emily's eyes filled with tears. You bought it, she said, more a statement than a question. I nodded. Through Linda's haven. A trust, not an ownership. It belongs to the family again, but not to be sold. Ever. Her lips trembled. Why? Because someone needed to remember what a promise means. Ryan stepped forward. Mr. Barnes, we never. I raised my hand gently. Ryan, this isn't a courtroom. You don't have to defend yourself. The house has already forgiven you. I have too, in my own way. He looked down. We thought we were doing the right thing. I know, I said. Fear can disguise itself as reason. It convinces you that betrayal is practicality. But it's still betrayal. Emily covered her face. Dad, I'm sorry. I really am. I know you are, I said softly. But I don't need your apology. I need your understanding. This house wasn't a possession, it was a promise your mother and I built from love. When you sold it, it wasn't money you took. It was meaning. Silence again. Even Claire, standing awkwardly by the counter, lowered her clipboard and excused herself quietly, sensing that this wasn't business anymore. I motioned toward the porch. Come, I said. Let's sit. We stepped outside. The cherry tree swayed gently in the breeze. Lily climbed onto the swing and began to rock softly, humming. I turned to Emily and Ryan. This home is under Linda's name now, in trust. No one owns it. Not me, not you. It's a place meant for peace. You're welcome to visit, but not to live here, not yet. Emily looked startled. You're not evicting us? I shook my head. I'm not taking anything away. I'm simply restoring boundaries. You broke something that can't be replaced, but it can be respected. She nodded slowly, tears streaking down her cheeks. Ryan stared at the ground, hands clenched. It's not punishment, I said quietly. It's a lesson. For all of us. We sat in silence for a long time. The sound of Lily's laughter mixed with the creak of the swing, the same rhythm that had once filled this porch when Emily was her age. For a moment, time folded in on itself. When they finally stood to leave, Emily turned back to me. Thank you, she said. For not hating me. Hate wastes too much space, I replied. I'd rather fill this house with quieter things. She nodded, understanding. Then she took Lily's hand and walked toward the car. Ryan followed a few steps behind, looking back once, as if memorizing something. When their car disappeared down Maplewood Lane, I sat alone on the porch, the spring air cool against my face. The cherry blossoms had started to fall, scattering across the steps like pale confetti. I thought about all that had happened, the betrayal, the letters, the boxes, the discovery, the purchase. It wasn't revenge that had brought me peace. It was clarity. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I brewed tea in Linda's old pot, the one she'd used every Sunday morning. I took my cup outside and sat on the swing, listening to the sound of the wind moving through the branches. In that moment, I didn't feel old, or broken, or wronged. I felt complete. The house was no longer a symbol of loss, but of endurance. It had survived deceit, greed, and time, just as love does when you give it patience. When I closed my eyes, I could almost hear Linda's voice again, calm and sure. Respect is not inherited, Ed. It's earned, and once you earn it, you must guard it like fire. I smiled. I know, I whispered back. And as dusk settled over Maplewood Lane, I realized something simple and final. Justice doesn't always arrive with noise or vengeance. Sometimes, it comes softly, in a father's calm, in a daughter's tears, in a home that finally, after years of silence, knows peace again. Weeks passed after that Saturday. The air grew warmer, the cherry tree burst into full bloom, and the house seemed to breathe again. I spent most mornings on the porch, coffee in hand, watching petals drift down like slow snow. The quiet didn't hurt anymore, it healed. Emily began visiting on Sundays, always with Lily. Ryan came once or twice, standing a few feet away, polite but uncertain, as if the air around the house still carried his guilt. I didn't push him away. I'd already made peace with the past. The house, too, seemed to forgive in its own way. Walls don't hold grudges if you treat them with care. One Sunday, Emily brought coffee in a paper bag and 2 muffins. We sat on the swing together, not speaking at first. Lily ran circles around the cherry tree, her laughter filling the yard. "It looks the same," Emily said finally. "It feels the same," I replied. "But it isn't." She nodded. "I know." After a moment, she asked, "Will I ever be part of this house again?" "You already are," I told her. "Just not as an owner. As a memory. As a caretaker when I'm gone. That's what the trust is for, to protect what's left of love from being traded again." She looked down, hands trembling slightly. "I didn't think you'd ever forgive me." "I didn't," I said honestly. "I understood you. Forgiveness is a gift, understanding is a bridge. We're standing on the bridge now." Her eyes filled, but she smiled faintly. "Mom would be proud of you." "No," I said, smiling back. "She'd be proud of us, for finding our way back without destroying what's left." We watched Lily chase a butterfly across the yard, her laughter blending with the rustle of petals. For a long time, we didn't speak. There was no need. Inside, the house had changed subtly. I had restored a few small things: Linda's quilt on the sofa, her photograph by the window, her old cup in the kitchen cabinet. Nothing extravagant. Just traces of her warmth placed carefully among the new. Some evenings, when the sun dipped low, I'd light a small lamp by the window and sit in Linda's chair. From there, I could see the porch, the tree, and the path Emily used to run down as a child. The light glowed softly against the glass, steady, golden, alive. That became my favorite time of day. Not morning, not night, just that thin line between them where everything feels balanced. One afternoon, Lily asked me, "Grandpa, what's a promise?" I smiled. "A promise is something you build. Like a house. It lasts only if you take care of it." She thought for a moment, then said, "Then this house is your promise." "Yes," I said quietly. "It is." Now the trust paperwork rests in a small safe under the stairs. I don't open it often, just once a year, to remind myself that what was once lost is now secured. Not by money, but by principle. I still keep the envelope Linda left me in the sewing cabinet. Not for its value, but for what it represented: foresight, faith, love that planned for darkness and left a light behind. Some evenings, Emily and Lily stay late. We have dinner on the porch, the swing creaking softly under us. The conversations are gentle: work, school, small stories of daily life. The wounds between us have healed, though they've left their marks. I wouldn't erase them even if I could. Scars, after all, are proof that something once mattered enough to hurt. When they leave, the house grows quiet again, but it no longer feels empty. It feels settled, like a field after a long storm. I finish my coffee, close the door, and whisper to the walls, "Rest easy." And I think, not without pride, that I've done what every man hopes to do before the end: leave behind something that can't be bought, broken, or sold. Respect. A promise kept. A home that finally learned peace.